On the final leg now, almost 5,000 miles under our collective belts, heading west towards Calais ultimately, but on the way stopping at Ypres, or Wipers, as it was known by First World War Pongos, to take in some of the First World War history, monuments and cemeteries. Having parked up in there on the outskirts of Ypres, we cycled in about 10-15 minutes, taking the more scenic route and the never-ending tap. First stop was the Menin Gate. Unfortunately, it's under maintenance at the moment, so it's covered in scaffolding, but we still attended the last post at 2000. Sleeping in the back of a van, roaming in the wilderness. These trenches are actually in the grounds of a hotel. Now, the hotel was built on the site of a castle that was here originally. Whether or not it was destroyed during the First World War, not too sure, but essentially awful lot of fighting here. The surprise to me was how close the two fronts were, both the German front lines and the British front lines. This area changed hands several times, and the lake that's in the grounds of the hotel was a result of a massive underground explosion set off by the Brits to take out some of the German high command and headquarters. Further down the road from the bomb crater and trenches we visited is a memorial to the Liverpool Scottish Regiment and also the Royal Engineers grave, both located in Railway Wood. The Royal Engineers site is unusual in that it's both a cemetery and a memorial. The bodies remain underground, so there are no individual gravestones there. All the names are inscribed on the memorial itself. The Flanders Fields Museum was very informative, as you'd expect. We took the opportunity to head up into the belfry, made the mistake of going up just as they were practicing with their bells, but some cracking views of the surrounding town from the top of the tower. Looking at the building from the outside, it's hard to believe the state it was in at the end of the war, but there is a picture that will be coming up shortly which shows you what was left just after Armistice Day. And not a lot is the answer. We had a reason for going to the British Cemetery, and that's because my great uncle, Thomas Higginson, was buried there, killed during the fighting that led up to Armistice Day, only 19, incredibly sad. This park up was rather pleasant. It's a camper car one, so all the normal facilities, grey waste, black waste, fresh water, and nicely situated next to a large lake. The Landegard crater owes its existence to the 179th Tunnelling Company Royal Engineers that detonated the mine underneath the German front line back in July 1916, and the explosion marked the beginning of the Battle of the Somme. The reason the crater is still there is all down to one man, a chap called Richard Dunning, who heard that the crater itself was going to be filled in and farmed, and he decided that no it's not, and set about raising funds to buy the land from the farmer and maintain the crater as a memorial and reminder to everybody of actually what happened on the Western Front. The walkways were part of a fundraising effort. Essentially, you sponsored a plank with a small plaque on it commemorating your relative. One of the lesser known monuments, but I couldn't really come to this area and not visit the RN Division monument. The achievements of the RN Division at the Battle of Ancre are well worth looking into, so ask Mr. Google, you'll be surprised. On to the memorial to the missing now. Again, very sombering experience. Popped into Arras to go to the Commonwealth War Graves Visitor Centre. Really interesting, well worth taking the tour there. Changing wars now, we're actually staying in the grounds of a French chateau, which is very nice. but it's located around the corner from one of the V1 V2 launch sites, so we went to have a mosey on around. There's an awful lot of fairly random hardware just lying around in the grounds. This was the largest blockhouse in northern France. Work started in 1943 and it was mainly slave labour. There were some locals involved, under duress it's fair to say, but primarily slave labour, mainly Jews, but also Russians, the old prisoner of war, and any other miscreants that the Nazis didn't like. The RAF spent the best part of a year bombing the place in order to disrupt the assembly plant process. Eventually, after extensive damage, it was decided to shift the launch site and the assembly areas to WWII, which is a quarry a little bit further down the road that they covered with a massive concrete shield. This is actually a V1 on its launch rails. Relatively primitive by the V2 standards, but still quite scary if you're on the receiving end of it. This is the second V2 launch site, and it's just down the road from the one we visited earlier. Bigger, more to it, far more complicated and far less prone to damage from the Air Force. The V1s or doodlebugs had been in production for a long time, and kicking off in 1943, the Germans started building launch sites in northern France, and with D-Day in June 1944, the first V1 rockets were fired on London. The V1 we saw earlier was a pulse jet powered cruise missile, whereas the V2 was a liquid fueled ballistic missile with a far longer range. And once assembled, it was moved along on a little railway track to the external launch site itself and lobbed off in the general direction of the UK. The V2 rockets were far more advanced than the V1s, different type of propulsion, and took a matter of minutes to travel the 200 miles from the launch sites to London. Sadly, you couldn't help but be impressed by the engineering.